Inconceivable. 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 Inconceivable.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast. Yay!
Yeah.
You can hear which one of us is more enthusiastic because it was my idea, but
It should be interesting.
I think it'll be more interesting for you than you think it might be.
All right.
But we've always kind of noticed that there's our cat who's already distraught that we're not giving him our full attention currently. I've always been really fascinated with stories that seem crazy or mysterious or even things that are kind of still left unexplained. Yeah, and I tend to be, let's say, open-minded about the possible things that might have happened. And this guy over here is gonna...
I'm a skeptic all the way.
He's gonna be the voice of reason, I suppose.
She believes in more, shall we say, supernatural type things and events as being more plausible, and I'm more of the simplest explanation mindset.
Sure, let's go with that. That
kind of
sounds
go
good.
with that. So she's gonna, tell the stories, and we'll see if I believe them, or I can pick them apart.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for it to be my goal to basically see if I can convince you of these crazy stories by the end.
Good luck.
All right, first episode, here we go. Have you heard the name Marina Chapman before?
No. I know a Chapman, but I don't know that one.
Okay, this is good. Good start. So, rather than just kind of give away the theme that we're talking about, I'm just going to start the story off and we'll see how we do. So, she's 5 years old. She's playing close to her house in Colombia, and then she suddenly is aware of two adults creeping up behind her. And, I mean, before I get too far into the story, I guess I should say that even though this is a very, very well-documented case that's considered to be pretty valid, all of this is based on her own account of things.
And she's 5.
At this point.
And what year is this?
I know I wrote it in here somewhere. I can't remember, though. Maybe it's somewhere else in these notes here.
Okay.
I'll try and figure it out.
So
or we can look it up later.
5-year-old is being trusted to tell a story.
No, can you wait?
I'm waiting. Okay, go.
When the story starts, she's 5.
Okay.
Moving on. Two adults are creeping up behind her. She says, I just saw a hand cover my mouth, and it was a black hand in a white hanky. And then they were taking her away, and she says she hears children in the background and they're crying.
Okay.
So she thinks that the hanky must have been soaked in chloroform, and she says that the last thing she knew, she was being driven in the rainforest, the Colombian rainforest. And for whatever reason, if she's maybe the wrong age for whatever these people have in mind, or she's causing too much trouble, she just gets dumped in the forest.
Okay.
So she talks about how she thinks she thought the kidnaps were just going to come back for her, and they never did. So now she's just a child in the middle of the Colombian rainforest.
I wouldn't want to be an adult in the middle of the Colombian rainforest, so that's
So that's quite something.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. And then she also thought she would be rescued by passersby, but obviously no one's coming. She's in the middle of a rainforest. And she's a child, so she just kind of cries and screams and walks around and is trying to find some kind of human life.
Again, same thing I would do. Yeah, we're good.
Pretty much, right? And then, there's just nothing. There's no hope at this point.
Yeah.
So, eventually she comes across this family of monkeys.
Okay.
You can kind of start to see where this is going a little bit. So, she says that in her small child mind, she was like, they're not human, but they look humanish. And then she starts to just kind of, she doesn't join this family, but she settles in that part of the jungle because there's some other form of life that's nearby.
Yeah.
So she just kind of, at this point, is just a child trying to survive, and she's going about her business, and she's scavenging for food, and she kind of just watches the monkeys kind of doing the same thing. They scavenge, they groom each other, they play, and they pretty much just ignore her.
Yeah.
Right? So Marina's just there, and they just ignore her, but she's just kind of watches. All right, so one of the memories that she remembers kind of triggering her experiences is that she gets horrible food poisoning from a tamarind, which is, I guess, like it's a type of tree that grows fruit, as far as I understand.
Okay, and fruit is...
Haha. I don't know if you heard of what a tamarind is.
I haven't, no.
So I thought I'd explain just in case. And maybe some of the listeners, have not heard of a tamarind, so I'm just covering all my bases, okay?
Good, your bases are covered. They're buried.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, she gets horrible food poisoning. She thinks she's going to die. She's a child. She doesn't know what to do. And she's basically on the forest floor writhing in agony because she's in so much pain. And she describes an elderly monkey, which I don't know how she can tell if it's elderly or not.
Probably had a cane.
Ha ha. So she says the monkey comes, kind of leads her over to the muddy water, and encourages her to drink the muddy water.
Okay.
And the muddy water makes her sick, and she vomits up.
Yeah.
And then she's recovering from the food poisoning.
Okay.
So that's kind of interesting.
I think the monkey was just like, water good, you drink. Like,
Possible.
not it's gonna make it throw up. It's like, hey, I drink water.
Yeah, in any case, I just find it interesting that this monkey is part of a family that's been ignoring her for all this time, and all of a sudden it just decides to intervene when it realizes that she's in some real distress.
Yeah. No,
So
that's
that
neat.
kind of gives off this vibe of somewhat humanness.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, so she drinks the water, vomits, and recovers, and after that, the younger monkeys start to kind of befriend her. And she's watching them closely, and she's learning how to climb trees, what things are safe to eat, how she should clean herself, and all this stuff. And she's growing up the whole time that she's living in this forest, right? She's aging and she's getting more mature.
Yeah.
She starts to get smart enough to realize that the monkeys that are climbing overhead in the trees carrying these armfuls of bananas, and when they're trying to juggle all these bananas, they drop some of them. So she would just watch them in the trees when they're carrying stuff, and she would walk underneath them so that whatever they drop, she can just take.
Smart kid, yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And then over time, she says the monkeys started to let her sit in the trees with them. And they would just kind of go off and look for food and leave her by herself, and she would get lonely again, but eventually they kind of developed this somewhat kinship.
Yeah, makes sense. Other animals have been known to kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, even like humans, granted, we use them as pets, but like you see like a dog or something that's hurt on the road, it's not uncommon for someone to like adopt that dog right then and there
for sure.
into the family.
100%. So I think, I mean, a lot of people are like, they're monkeys, they can't like feel empathy. Well,
Love is love.
Exactly. Anyways, so I find it intriguing. And then she, like later on, she's telling this account as an adult, right, looking back on her experiences. And she was so young that when people ask her if she thought about her family anytime, she's like, I was too young to really know or remember my human family, you know?
Yeah.
And she says that, yeah, she tries to imagine or to work back to those memories, but she just can't get there. Anyways, that's interesting. She readily admits that she wouldn't have survived in the forest without the monkeys, and she thinks they were Capuchins.
Okay.
Which apparently are well known to be... They're, like, known to be well-disposed towards humans, which I didn't know. I thought they were more, like, pranksters and tricksters than, like, friendly, nice-to-human types.
Yeah.
But they, from her earliest memories, they just weren't interested in her. And they didn't aggressively attack her or anything, but she just was like, whatever.
Yeah, just let bygones be bygones.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, fair enough.
So she kind of grows up in this monkey family. They start to accept her and like play pranks on her. Like she told stories of younger monkeys coming up and just peeing on her leg while she's laying there. So that's kind of funny.
Like, hey, how you doing?
And then she says, this is really cool. She says she starts to understand the noises that they made. So there was a specific whistle that had to do with food.
Yeah.
And that there's food nearby and they should get ready to follow the monkey who sees the food.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to read this from like a written, like translate this from an...
Was it more of like a or a...
I don't know. Okay. There's a when they're grooming each other.
Okay.
And then a warning when they feel in danger. So, like, some kind of warning call.
Okay.
So, that's kind of interesting.
And that also, to me, like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we have 2 little turds that we call cats. And we've had them for, what, a year and a half now?
Yeah.
We can understand the noises they make, as well as their body language pretty well. Like, when one of them wants attention...
Like Mila right now.
Like Mila, who's currently, sniffing the microphone. They have a very certain kind of sound. Mm-hmm. Like, they have a certain meow, or when they've got something in their mouth and they're trying to show us, it sounds differently, or when they're playing with each other and one of them's like, stop.
Yeah.
They'll even let out a slightly different sound when they're hungry. You kind of learn to tell, but it's still impressive for a kid.
It's impressive for a kid living in the jungle who was probably just starting to speak fluently, you know, in terms of human language. Yeah. And is now, all of a sudden, understanding what these monkeys are saying, you know. It's kind of cool. So anyways, when people ask her about what she did, like, to pass the time in the jungle, she says that everything with the monkeys was about food. Yes. You get up in the morning and you think, what will you find to eat? Yes. And then you go to sleep and think, what can you eat tomorrow? And then she said maybe she would amuse herself playing with, like, birds and lizards and, like, bugs.
So, see, they're not that different from humans after all. That's how I spend most of my days. Like, that was really good. I wonder what I get to eat tomorrow when I go to bed.
Nice. I mean, yeah, not too much of a stretch. So she estimates for around 5 years. She has no way of measuring, but she says for an estimated 5 years she lived in the jungle with no human company whatsoever. Just the monkeys. Yeah. So, hence the title of this episode, which is going to be the Real Life Jungle Book. She remembers learning to fend for herself and eating berries and roots and grabbing the bananas that the monkeys dropped and sleeping in holes in trees and walking on all fours and basically all of that stuff you would expect from living in the jungle. And she liked living with the monkeys, but she still craved human contact. Yeah. So that's something that was interesting. She didn't notice it go away, even though she was now part of the jungle as much as these monkeys were, right?
Yeah. She's, like, you can't really talk to the monkeys in the same way you can expect. Yeah. They're, even at, like, 5 years old, like, we both worked with kids, and, like, at that age, they have their own conversations that have nothing to do with anything whatsoever, but it's the fact that they're talking, they're communicating.
Yeah, they're talking to someone.
When you look at the monkey, it's not like her, but it doesn't really matter, you know, what race, what age, whatever. You can look at another human and say, yes, this person is like me, right? And there's a kind of kinship in that.
Yeah. So, anyways, this is where it starts to get even more crazy than just... It already has been, with a child living in the jungle for 5 years.
Hit me.
So she's craving human contact, and she sees hunters come into the jungle occasionally. And they were terrifying to her because she's this child, and they have guns and machetes. And, you know, but she recognizes that they're human, like she is. So she tries to make contact with them, and she says by the time this happened, she had lost her language.
Yeah, so makes sense.
She can't, like, communicate with them. Anyways, one day she says she approached the hunters, and she's, you know, naked, on all fours, and she's basically just speaking with grunts, trying to get them to understand that she wants them to rescue her. Yeah. They did, but this is where it gets even more crazy. They sold her into a brothel, and she was renamed Gloria, and basically forced to clean herself, and regularly beaten, and basically tried to get, like, rehumanized? If that's the right word?
You can't see it, but the face is just... A brothel? Yeah. Oh. She's like 10 at this point, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's okay.
So, I told you, it's getting even more crazy than just a child getting raised in the jungle. Yeah. So, right before she's about to be given to her first man... Okay. She escapes.
Oh, thank God. I was like, I don't like where this story is going. Can we pick a new one, please?
And people, when she tells her story, they wonder if she kind of sanitized the story or, like, changed the story to benefit her family. Because she has a new family now that she's living, like, this is, you know, when she's all grown up and she's retelling her story. And, you know, people are like, okay, this is where the story gets less believable than it already is. Like, what are the chances that you managed to free just before you're forced to do that? And apparently her response is always, no, I was just lucky.
No, and see, depending on when she escaped, like, you're 10 years old, you've lived your entire life climbing trees and stuff, so I don't care if this is like a second floor, you can get down, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the man is up. Like, coming up to you, whatever, he's naked or he's getting naked. You're 10, you're freaking the heck out, right?
Yeah.
I could totally see it if that was the case. Like, and as weird as it's gonna sound, if you lived with the monkey, she probably knew kind of what sex was.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
In terms of, like, oh, a new baby monkey's arrived. Or I'm sure she's just seen monkeys, do a monkey business. So I'm sure she kind of, like, had a weird thing in her mind, like, this is a bad situation.
Yeah.
And that's how she got away. That I would believe.
Yeah, that's
I don't
fair.
believe, like, I need to flee before tomorrow night. My spider sense is tingling. But I would totally believe
Yeah.
she saw the signs and was like, well, I'm out of here.
She probably went through some sort of
Training? Yeah, ugh.
Anyways.
Gonna go have a shower after this one.
I'm sorry. On top of the whole jungle living thing, and the getting sold to a brothel thing, she's now living homeless on the streets of Calcutta. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. With all these homeless children.
Okay.
She's renamed Pony Malta by her friends.
Nice.
And in brackets it says, because she resembled the dark drink in its short bottle. So I guess she's named after a drink.
Cool.
And this is crazy. She becomes kind of the leader of this homeless gang by putting all the skills she learned from the monkeys to use.
Okay.
So now she's stealing from the wealthy people. And so it says in brackets again, one trick was to creep up on young women wearing short skirts, pull down their knickers, then run off with their bags, which they would drop in shock.
Love this kid. I mean, okay, so I'm assuming she would have learned a little bit of English at Le Brathol, but I don't know, like, I get she's probably in better shape than a lot of homeless kids, but at this point in time, she's probably, 12 to 14?
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
I do find that a little hard to believe, but I guess it depends on the size of, like, if it's like a gang, but it's like 4 homeless kids going together, I could be like, okay, but if there's like 20 kids,
no,
and
I think it was small.
Okay, because if there was like 20 and everyone's looking up to like this, for lack of a better term, like monkey child,
yeah,
that would be a little bit, inconceivable.
Haha. No. Hey, as far as I can tell, it's never explicitly said in any of the research I did, but as far as I can tell, it's just a small little troop of kids.
I could get that.
And anyways, yeah, so she
probably like flung her poo at them to show dominance.
Demonstrating, she told stories of the monkeys doing that.
Like, she just walks up, like, right in the face. I'm leader now.
It does say that she was able to hide from the victims and the police in the treetops, because she can just scramble up there so quickly.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of cool.
Neat skill to have.
So, one day, a friend tells Marina how she escaped the streets by working for board and lodgings as a domestic. So Marina finds a family that agrees to take her on, and they rename her again Rosalba. It turns out this family is a family of notorious criminals, and they enslave her.
Okay. Okay. No, see, that I could actually believe. I could actually, like, that is totally something an enterprise would do. Like, there's a bunch of homeless kids. You're like, hey, kid, I'll give you $50 and a warm place to sleep if you come with me. And then they go into slavery or the sex trade.
But it's just a whole thing, like one thing after another is happening.
This poor girl.
So she flees again with the help of a neighbor, a woman called Maruja, who has 9 children of her own. Eventually, Maruja sent her to live with one of the children far away in Bogota. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing these correctly, but I'm very sorry, I'm probably not. Maruja bought her a plane ticket, and the first present that she ever remembers actually getting.
First present?
Yes, the first present, because she lived in the jungle, and then a brothel, and then homeless. So, this kind lady gives her a dress made of blue satin and a hair clip and white socks and a pair of shiny white shoes.
Aww.
And she's so happy, and she says it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen because it's her first gift. And she was also naked for the majority of her young life, so there's that.
Yeah.
At this point, she's 14.
Okay, yeah. The gang at 13, brothel from the age of like 10 to 12, depending on how long they're getting it ready.
So at the point where she's 14, she's actually adopted by Maria, who is one of Maruja's daughters.
Okay.
So they adopt her and tell her she's completely free, she can choose her own name. Now she's her own person, right?
Yeah.
She calls herself Les Marina, and Les is after apparently a Colombian beauty queen.
Okay.
So that's cool.
Les Marina.
And the whole name thing is significant because I guess she wrote like some kind of memoir, and it was all about how she was without a name for the longest time, and people just kind of kept giving her their own name that they wanted to give her.
Yeah.
So finally she's allowed to choose what she wants to be called. All right, so now we're moving into kind of the transition from her youth to her adulthood. She moves to Bradford, Yorkshire. She meets and marries a man named John Chapman and has her own children. And her husband and children hear her tell stories of monkeys and climbing trees and all that stuff, but they're never told in a linear fashion.
Okay.
And over time, it was just slowly coming out that she's a bit unusual. That's all the impression that they're getting, right?
Yeah.
So when they were young, she'd show them how to climb trees, and they'd just think, oh, this is fun, you know? And then she'd pat around all fours and make them laugh. But again, they're kids, and they're like, oh, it's just funny.
Yeah, I would do the same with my kids.
Right?
Right.
So there's... And then they notice, as they grow older, that there's strange little things that she struggles with. So she struggles with opening doors, because there's no twisty handles in the jungle, you know?
That part feels weird to me.
Yeah?
Well, because, okay, so how old was she when she got married? Like, let's assume she was like 20-ish or older, right?
I don't know.
So she's been out of the jungle for 10 years. Now, I've never been to a brothel, but I'm pretty sure doors are still a thing. And she got adopted by the one family. I'm assuming, doors are not the most complicated thing. I'm assuming she's learned how to speak relatively decent language to get married. Like, the door thing feels a little bit like padding.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, it could be exaggeration. They don't say, though, that she can't open them.
Yeah,
they just say they noticed it was awkward for her.
Yeah, I guess if she does it in a weird way, I could kind of see that.
Anyways, so point being, they grow up just thinking that she's kind of quirky, kind of funny, and it isn't until her children start to make friends and visit their parents' house that they kind of notice the differences.
Mom is weird.
Yeah, pretty much. So, moving on to her, like, reflecting as an adult, and she is ashamed of how feral she was as a child, and she had, the whole time, she didn't, like, consider herself to be completely fine or quote-unquote normal, because I don't want to sound, like, mean when I say that.
No, but
she
adjusted, kind of, to
yeah. She was fully aware the whole time of her differences in habits and traits, and how they weren't considered the usual. She says when she came out of the jungle, she had to learn how to sit in a chair, how to open doors, sanitation, and all these things.
Yeah.
She says, I'm still bad at sitting down and behaving like everybody else, because it's just not in her nature.
Yeah.
She says she had to watch people eating their food in a proper, mannerly way and had to copy them. And that she felt like she was such a bad person as a child, and she was ashamed, and that kind of has stayed with her, which is really sad.
I was about to say, that's unfortunate.
It's really sad. But yeah. So she focused for most of her adult life on becoming, like I said, quote-unquote normal. She trained as a cook, eventually working her way up to becoming a chef at Bradford's National Media Museum.
Okay.
And she says, I reined in the urge to walk like a monkey.
I mean, baby steps.
So it's only recently that Vanessa, her daughter, I guess, decided to piece together her mom's story and started writing it all down as a private document for the family.
Okay.
And the more she finds out, the more she thought it would make a great book. And if it was published, then maybe her mom, Marina, could track down her actual biological parents that she was taken from.
Yeah.
So the Chapmans say that they didn't do it for the money. So Marina's new family. And they actually said they'll give any proceeds away to a charity for abandoned children.
That's nice.
Yeah. It's pretty nice.
Like, you can kind of see, this would be a very easy thing to monetize.
Very easy.
Right? Like, hey, look, we literally have the Jungle Book. It's real.
Mm-hmm.
This happened. But they're kind of like, no, let's help out other people. I like that.
Yeah, so I think the fact not only that they're giving away the money, but also that they're giving it to a charity that's related to abandoned children, which is something that, is related to the mom's story, that for some people, for some listeners, that might make it sound a bit more credible.
Yeah.
So they started by approaching a number of publishers who obviously reject the book. I guess they probably didn't find it very believable, right?
Yeah.
But they kept pressing on with their project, and they were visiting Colombia to try and make sense of her past, as I think I mentioned earlier in our previous conversation about her adult life.
Yes.
And she couldn't find the part of the rainforest where she spent her years with the monkeys, because obviously
Rainforests are generally big.
Huge.
Yeah.
But yes, she found the brothel into which she had been sold, and the mafia house where she was enslaved. So she found both of those.
Okay, yeah.
Why are you laughing?
It's just, when you say it out loud again, it's like, it sounds like something straight out of a fiction book.
Yeah,
like
that's
you're like
the whole point of this
describing. I know,
podcast.
it's so interesting that it's real. Like, it's like, then she found the brothel, and then she found the
mafia house where she was enslaved,
and then she saw like her great uncle monkey swinging through the trees, so she brought him a banana to celebrate his 50th birthday. Like, okay, not that last part, but you get my drift.
And my whole point of the podcast is that sometimes,
Weird
like
things
you
happen.
like to say, sometimes reality is stranger than fiction.
It is, absolutely.
So, yeah. And since all of this, she's lived in Yorkshire for 30 years. It says she speaks a wonderful Colombian-Bradford hybrid with flat vowels and lisping and Latin American flourishes. The trouble is, Marina says, because now, as far as I know, this memoir is all published.
Okay.
And it is a thing. And she says, oh yeah, it is, because earlier in my notes we were talking about how the memoir was called like The Child Without a Name or whatever.
Yeah.
So definitely it is. Anyway, ever since she started telling her story, she says the problem is that the press has exaggerated or misinterpreted much of it, or misreported.
Yeah.
So
kind of happens.
When it's Marina saying that, like I said, it seems a bit more credible, because she's like, no, I'm not intentionally trying to blow this out of proportion or make it sound more extravagant or amazing than it actually was.
That's just kind of where the media works, though, right? Like, it's like a giant game of telephone. She could be like, I lived with monkeys, and I had to learn how to eat and survive. And then the next reporter is going to be like, man, I bet she had to dodge tigers. Are there tigers? There were tigers. She had to dodge tigers. It was really... And then the next guy is like, and then somehow a bear wound up there. We don't even know. She became friends with the bear. Like, it just escalates.
Uh-huh. So that's the part that she said she's not happy about. The fact that they decided to tell her story and kind of make it public. So the subtitle of the book is The Incredible True Story of a Child Raised by Monkeys. And apparently to that she says, that's not right. Even at 5 years old, I was much bigger than the monkeys. And I scavenged food from them, but they didn't provide for me.
Yeah.
All they did was invite her into their extended family. And that's what she says.
It wasn't so much like a parent-child relationship as like, hey, you're a creature, I'm a creature, I'm gonna tolerate your presence.
Yeah, like...
you pick fleas off my back, and I'll let you have the scraps from dinner. Yeah.
Pretty much. So, I find that really interesting that this lady is like, no, guys, like, you're not getting the story right. Anyway... It's kind of fun. I'd love to see her just give her own, like, have a documentary where she's just telling it in her own words,
I'd watch a
That'd
TED.
be so much better.
A TED Talk on her.
Yeah.
And it's about like overcoming adversity or something like that. I'd watch that.
It'd be fun. So anyway, Marina's account asks a lot of her readers and leads us to examine the nature of memory. So this is something that comes up in a lot of conversations about her case.
Yeah.
And the question is always, if she can't remember her pre-jungle childhood, how can we trust what happened after that? And that she remembers what happened after. And I remember you saying that a bit at the beginning of this episode, is how much can we rely on the memories she had when she was 5?
Like, I have trouble... I can remember general things, But, like, there are photos of me doing things that I'm like, I have no recollection of this whatsoever.
And, like,
I don't typically have any solid memories since before I was, I'd say 10 or 12.
I do. I think most people have solid memories, but this is the thing, and this is the argument I'm going to make. The reason your memories from earlier are so sparse is because the further back you go into your memory, your brain is only keeping the most significant and memorable things.
Yeah.
The things that you have an emotional attachment to specifically.
Yeah.
So my point to this would be, yes, she was young, but because it's such a big emotional experience,
She latched onto the memories more.
I would have a hard time believing that, assuming that this is all true and it happened, I have a hard time believing that she wouldn't be remembering it properly, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's so significant and so emotional.
I think some details,
Obviously, some
brain,
details.
kind of changes a little bit. But I think, the general gist of the story is probably correct.
Yeah, like that's just my personal opinion, that when there's such heavy emotion involved, it's hard to just say, oh, we can't rely on your memories of this.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
You know? And yeah, there's a lot of talk about, can she be suffering from false memory syndrome? Which I'm not going to discredit. I think that could be a thing. And the whole idea behind that is that she unconsciously invented the story of the monkeys to cope with an even more traumatic childhood experience.
I mean, listen, like, what's the old John Locke, right? I think, therefore I am. Yeah. The only thing we really know is we exist.
Yeah.
Right? For all I know, I'm sitting in, like, the middle of nowhere thinking that I'm having a conversation with you, recording a podcast. Everything is kind of subject to a degree of interpretation.
Yeah.
Especially memories when no one else can verify them.
Yeah, I was going to say it's different for one person than two, because if you and I are both...
If we can verify something happened, Occam's razor says, yes, that probably did happen if you have two different accounts of verification.
Yeah, because the alternative is less believable, which is that we're both having the exact same, like, hallucination at the same time.
But the idea that a child created an alternate story to hide trauma, especially when we later find out if the brothel part was true and the mafia part was true, like, maybe something worse did happen, and maybe this is her brain's way of making it better, for lack of a better term. Yeah. You know? Mm-hmm. But
that's where, that's kind of, those are sort of the reactions that there have been to this story. It's pretty much split 50-50 between she's telling the truth and it was so long ago that obviously she's not going to remember it perfectly. Yeah. And then there's the other side of the argument, which is, well, we don't even know if this is true and it could just be a false memory. Yeah. So anyway, her husband John is himself, his personal opinion is that the amnesia is a reaction to the stress of her situation as a child, and it was some sort of survival mechanism. Okay. So, quote, I think her energy was fully occupied in trying to keep alive in the jungle. Basically, she was starting life all over again, and from that point of view, I would think everything goes out of the window. Yeah. Unquote.
That's fair enough.
So, yeah. And then, on a different perspective, from Colombian professor Carlos Conde, he said that he conducted tests with Marina, using pictures of Capuchin monkeys and her adoptive family. And the experiment was basically testing the emotional reactions in her brain to the pictures.
Does this picture make you feel anything?
Exactly.
Actually, like, looking into your brain to see.
Yeah. So they can clearly see, however it is that she's hooked up, they can clearly see if she has an emotional reaction to seeing something.
Makes sense.
And yeah, apparently this test demonstrated to him that she was telling the truth.
There are ways to beat tests, but if she believes the story to be true, she's gonna pass the test
for sure.
Right? Like,
and that's why I don't like.
If she was just making it up to, like, make a quick buck, that'd probably be a good way to be like, she don't know what she's talking about. But if she either subconsciously made it up or consciously made it up and then forgot, like, it became her reality afterwards. Like, you know when you tell such a big lie that you can't remember the truth?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but
anyway,
all right.
So I'm not saying it proves it's true,
but it is interesting.
What I'm saying is that this test basically proved that she wasn't making it up for some sort of
publicity stunt, or
That's basically all it proves.
She wasn't consciously lying.
Regardless of whether she experienced it or not, she has a strong emotional reaction to the pictures of the monkeys.
Interesting.
As if, like, equally responsive as if she was looking at pictures of her own family.
Interesting.
And this is what the professor said, quote, "The response was very striking. It strongly suggests that you've had a direct relationship with these animals and your emotional memory is strongly associated with those experiences." So, that's what he said. So, apparently, I was talking about a documentary. I didn't realize there is one. I have it written in my notes here. So, the documentary, I don't have, like, a title for it, apparently, in my notes. I just wrote the documentary. Takes Marina back to Colombia to try and trace any members of her birth family who are still alive. And today, she is clear on who it is she wants to find. So, earlier she was like, I don't remember my human family, like I don't have any emotional connection to them.
Yeah.
But at this point she's trying to retrace those roots just to really figure out how much of her experiences she's remembering properly.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So at the very beginning of this episode, you asked me what year it was, and I was trying to find it in my notes and I couldn't because it's at the very end of my notes for whatever reason. So today she's 70 and her estimated birth year is 1950.
Okay. Okay. I had a thought.
Yeah.
And it's not a good person thought. But the year kind of gives it more credibility that this might not be the case. Like, nowadays, for example, if you go missing, right, and I file a missing persons report, and you show up 30 years later, in theory, it shouldn't be that hard to go, okay, we know, you're kind of from this area.
Right.
Right? We found the brothel, for example, so you must be a town relatively nearby, say within 50 miles. Look for missing children's reports from whenever ago, based on your estimated age, to find the parents. Right? And I've never been outside of kind of like our home continent, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And my first thought was, okay, how do you just let your kid get taken and not file a report that would be able to be found later? But the fact that this was so long ago, I could kind of be like, I guess records might not have been as great back then.
I honestly...
Or, like, the family was, like...
My personal
horrible,
opinion...
or they got rid of her. That was my first thought, is they had,
the
like,
family did?
They had, like, a debt, and they were just selling the kid.
Could be. So, yeah, if...
And that sounds horrible, but
okay.
It's like, if my kid was taken, I would be looking for the rest of my life.
Yes.
I would make sure reports are filed, etc. But it kind of seems like they were like, oh, the kid's gone. Well,
yes. Can I talk?
Yes, sorry.
I am trying to say, at the beginning of this story, there was that whole thing where she gets kidnapped.
Yeah.
And then she just gets dumped in the forest without explanation.
Yeah.
And in her memoir, she doesn't say anything about, like, I caused trouble, or I was, like, misbehaving, or I overheard them say this.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing about that. It just says, oh, they dumped me. So, my personal opinion of what happened is either that the family could care less and did not file any sort of report whatsoever. So the kidnapping happens and it's a matter of chance, but the family's like, oh, whatever.
Or there was no kidnapping. They're like, we can't afford to feed another mouth.
That to me also makes sense. So the whole, we just need her to disappear.
Yeah.
They hire these people and they're like, okay, let's make her disappear. Let's go and drive her in the middle of the friggin' rainforest and just drop her and she'll just die.
I hadn't even thought about, for some reason I'd forgotten about that there was no conflict. I'm not even saying hired someone. I'm saying dad just puts on like a ski mask. And...
Okay, but I was about to add, the only other thing is that she remembers hearing other children crying, which seems to point to the fact that there were other kids who had been taken. That's the only thing that's...
That, to me, makes me think less kidnapping. Because here's why. I'm not a, criminal in terms of like I've jaywalked. That's about it. But like I'm not gonna go like, all right, this is the night I'm gonna kidnap 6 kids in a single night, leave 5 of them crying somewhere, right? Like.
Well, I guess it's in some kind of van. Like, there's just a big van.
I guess.
With full of kids, and they just throw her in, and then...
I feel like you're getting greedy after 1 or 2.
I just... Anyways, my whole point... I want to end this podcast before it gets too long, but basically, I personally believe that the reason she hasn't been able to track down her family is because, regardless of whether they were involved in her disappearance or not, they did not care.
Yeah,
and there was no missing persons report filed or anything.
I can second that idea.
So yeah. To conclude, with a final quote from Marina, this is just kind of how she concludes whenever she is interviewed about her story. To be honest, I am losing interest in who my real family were, says Marina. I just have no feelings for them. I'm sorry to think that way. I would rather find the monkeys. I really believe they will remember me. Unquote. So, overall...
I believe that she believes it.
So what is that? Is that a conceivable or an inconceivable?
It's conceivable. It is conceivable. Like, the story is definitely, well within the realm of possibility. Because, like, there's like 7 billion people on the planet. There's massive areas of jungle and stuff that's been unexplored. I've heard a similar story about girls getting raised by wolves.
Okay.
It's like twin girls, and I know that one is supposed to be verified. Mm-hmm. So it's like I can definitely see it happen. I do think the details are probably a little bit muddied. Like we talked about with
because of the whole media getting involved.
Well, even memory, right? Like I definitely think that the parents probably didn't care. I think the monkey stuff might be a cover-up for something, like, not consciously, but for something worse than that happened. Like, and I'd hate to say that, but that's kind of, it's possible. But, yeah, no, I think it's conceivable.
Okay.
I think this could have happened.
Great. First episode. Doing good.
Episode.
Conceivable.
We have a conceivable.
So, before we end this episode, though, we did our whole introduction at the very beginning, and then neither of us introduced ourselves. So, so we just came up with, I want to say stage name, but that's not right because this isn't stage, but like...
It's our personas.
Sure, our persona names.
Yeah.
So this guy right here, the skeptic/critic, is going to be Scoff.
I'll be Scoff, yeah.
Scoff.
That's Scoff.
And I'm Wonk, because apparently, like...
You're wonky.
It's a word that actually means,
it's
like...
not a word.
It is a word.
It's not a word.
You're talking to an English major here. It's a word. It's kind of describes a person who's, like, nerdy, a heavy researcher, and I'm the researcher of the group. So.
Yeah, that's about right, I guess. Scoff and Wonk.
Scoff and Wonk. So, sorry that we didn't introduce ourselves at the beginning, but now we have, so that's all done with. And you will see Scoff and Wonk in our next podcast, episode 2.
Of Inconceivable.
Very nicely done.
I thought so.
So for now, guys, take care, and we will see you next time.
Have a good one. Bye.